Hi, class. So, for your next assignment for this class, following up your last one, World Well Built, I want you to create a world now. This is going to take some time and be a bit of work, so I want to make a video here walking you through some of the basic questions you're going to want to answer. There should be a document along with this assignment for you to read through, asking you some good questions to be thinking about. But the whole point is you are going to be creating an entire world for this assignment. Really, you're going to be coming up with all the details of this place. What is it? What's going on there? Why is it important? What sort of stories might be happening there? You're going to eventually create at least one story in this place. So I wanted to walk you through the beginnings of it. That's what you're going to be creating this week. So first questions you should be asking yourself is, what kind of world is this? Is it the real world? Is it like this, the world you currently live in? Is it a second world, as in a completely different place? Like Lord of the Rings world, like Middle Earth, what that's called, or is it some blurring of the two? Which ironically, Middle Earth is actually a bit of a blurring of the two, as J.R.R. Tolkien saw it as a mythological past world of Earth. So be thinking about that. What's your world going to be? Is it a second world? Is it the real world? Is it the real world made slightly different? You can create a second world completely from scratch. This picture here is from Terry Pratchett's Discworld series. He made a mythological world where the world is literally flat. Flat earthers must have loved this, right? It's a disc. It's on the back of 4 elephants, on the back of a giant turtle flying through space. That's pretty creative. What's your world going to be like? You can also have historical fiction. That's a great way to make a world. This is from the story The Man in the High Castle, which is historical fiction, as if, what if America lost World War II? And America, what we call America, is split between Japan and Nazi Germany. So currently today, what if what we call America doesn't even belong to what we think of as the United States? That's a great world to set a story in, right? When you do historical fantasies, which are really popular to do, be creative, do whatever you want. Like this picture is from the movie Inglourious Basterds, where they kill Hitler at the end, which is great. You can do that. Audiences love that. But if you're going to have something like Attila the Hun kidnapping Florence Nightingale without a time machine, you're going to need to have some explanations. So that's something to be thinking about for your world, right? So be thinking about where your world fits historically. Also, be thinking about what your world literally looks like. What type of environments are there? Deserts, oceans, mountains, forests. What type of animals? What's the climate like? Does it have earth animals? Does it have an earth climate? None of this needs to be the same as here, right? As if any of you have read the story, The Song of Ice and Fire, this series, and our seasons aren't set. Like, they could be any number of months long. Sometimes winters are incredibly long and people die. Sometimes summers are incredibly long and people forget how dangerous that winters can be. So you can also take inspiration from real countries, right? When you plan out your world. This picture is from a role-playing game that I played when I was in high school called Roadhogs. It was a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles post-apocalyptic game. And on this map, this is a map of the West Coast. You can see Sacramento right there. I loved this because I grew up on the West Coast, but there's lots of places that I knew. Redding was over there. I'm from Southern Oregon, so I knew lots of these places, but I love that they took this type of inspiration. Maybe where you could take inspiration from places you know. And then you need to do these next steps with your place, whatever world you come up with. First, number one is, as you populate your world with people, is be careful with tropes and stereotypes, right? Even the imaginary worlds of fantasy and science fiction have harmful stereotypes if we're not careful, right? So you need to be careful of those. H.P. Lovecraft is a famous science fiction fantasy author, and he is famously racist, unfortunately. He talks about the horrors of Oriental space in his book, in his story, The Shadows over Innsmouth. Or if you look at Mickey Rooney's representation in Breakfast at Tiffany's. It's unfortunate to see, right? So how do we avoid those? Well, you can invent new cultures, right? If you're going to use tropes and stereotypes, then make a brand new world if you're going to do that. I've watched people talk about how one thing they love about the story Avatar: The Last Airbender is that it's not planet Earth. So they took all of these different Asian cultures, but they aren't Asia. These aren't Asian countries. It's a different planet. That's a clever idea. I mentioned here at the bottom, you can also do what Japan does and use flat art, right? I'm not sure Americans get to use this because of our history of colonialism, but if you're not an American, you can use flat art. And that's where they use just the imagery of art. They don't use any of the deeper meanings of it. So like, take a look at this picture here. In anime, you'll see this a lot. This is the anime Evangelion. You see lots of Christian imagery here, right? Even the names of the three wise men. You see 666 up here. You see crosses. This is supposed to be Adam. None of that though. This here, this symbol, this is the what do you call that? Anyway, this is all mysticism, but none of it actually means that in the actual cartoon. It's just imagery. It's just to be pretty. So if you aren't from a colonial background, you can use this. Second thing is, are you going to invent an alien species for your world, right? Maybe you are. Think about that. Is it from space, from an alternate dimension, from the past or the future? Are they spiritual aliens? Are they unreal aliens? Are we the aliens? There's all sorts of options that you can have. There's another option is, the thing you want to come up with is a new slang or language with your people. So you might know this, but Elven for Lord of the Rings and Klingon from Star Trek are famously complete languages that you can learn. So that's amazing, right? Come up with that. Readers love that kind of stuff. There's a lot of other examples here I talk about in the movie A Clockwork Orange. There's a dialect called Nasdat that they actually created for that movie. Joss Whedon's Firefly, they have a blend of Chinese and American with this Old West science fiction setup. In Cyberpunk, they mix English, Spanish, and Japanese for onomatopoeia. If any of you have played that game or seen the show, actually, there's a show now too. So that kind of stuff makes your worlds rich, right? So as you keep populating people, number 4, come up with your civilization's history, right? Civilizations are defined by their history. It needs to have one. So a line between historical fiction and fantasy is somewhat blurred. So like I talk about again, the George R. R. Martin's A Song of Ice and Fire. It's basically a retelling of the War of the Roses. I don't know if you knew that or not. But all of that type of thing, when you retell history, if you have a deep history, I mean, that's what makes Lord of the Rings so rich. What makes people love it so much is that there's basically a Bible written before you even get to the Lord of the Rings. It's huge. And then I think this is number 5 is speculate on history-altering moments. So what happened up till now, and how does that impact these characters, this culture, this world? How does it change things, right? Also, are you going to have technology? Are you going to have magic? What's the difference? Talk about that. We're going to talk about this more in the future, but right now when world building, are you going to have that in your world or not? We're going to talk about magic more later, a lot more in depth. And then this is deep, but are you going to distribute the resources with a working economy? I ask here, do you have to? Well, you at least need to determine, what do people consider valuable, right? Do people trade? Do they trade with money? What for? Why? I talk about the Star Trek problem. This picture here. So this is something that's bothered me since I was a kid. In Star Trek world, they don't have money. They make a big point about saying money doesn't exist. But also in the show, the characters are constantly playing poker. They're playing it for what? I've played poker without money. It's boring. So I'm not sure what's going on there. So the real question is, where do your characters fit in the financial pecking order? You need to know. You need to know what drives them, what motivates them, right? You need to determine your world's power structure. What's going on in the bigger world at hand, right? I talk about stuff here. I mean, we're going to get really big here, but like you can draw from reality. Like Philip Pullman's His Dark Materials talks about the conflict between the church and the secular world. You could talk about The Handmaid's Tale, which talks about the conflict between the church and the secular world. You can talk about Dune, which goes into far future and talks, Dune really goes into the world's power structure in Dune is insane. But yeah, I talk about American Gods here in the bottom. That's a fun book if you haven't read it, but what's the world power structure in there? Well, it's ancient gods fighting to actually have meaning and purpose in today's world. What's your world? What's going on? Who's fighting for power? Who has power? Who wants it? Yeah. All of this stuff, I want you to have decided at least to some degree, right? You need to know it. Even if you don't talk about it in your story, you need to know it. And then, what's this world about? So, stories set in other worlds have always actually been about the world we live in. And that's a secret here that I'm mentioning at the end, right? When you read a good science fiction or fantasy story, it's about another world, but really it's about us. We read stories about us. Some of the most enduring works of science fiction and fantasy are profound commentaries on human culture and, in particular, our relationship to power and powerlessness. So, even if your story takes place in a galaxy far, far away, always remember to ask yourself, what are you trying to say about society and the human condition? All right, sound good? So, for your assignment for this, I want you to build a world. I'm going to attach with this a document that has a whole bunch of questions. I want you to answer as many of them as you can and flesh out a world. Give us a world description, and then we're going to move on from there. But that's your next assignment, and I hope this makes sense. And I wish I could be there with you in person, but I'm positive you're going to do a good job, and I'm excited to see what you guys come up with. Good luck.